Hello and welcome to Catholic Current, where we discuss our faith and give you an update on events affecting the Church in the United States. From Washington, D.C., I'm Mara Moser. Today, we are having a conversation with Bill Canny, Executive Director of USCCB's Migration and Refugee Services. Thank you for joining us, Bill. I know this has been a busy week for you.
Mara, it's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, let's just get right into it. Earlier this week on Monday, the USCCB issued a press release defending its work as part of the Refugee Admissions Program. What prompted that?
Well, there were some comments made by a high government official that mischaracterized the work of the Catholic Conference, but also the Catholic charities around the country. We clarified that we do take federal money to resettle refugees, and that we clarified that these are not illegal immigrants. And let me just tell you a little bit about this program, if I may.
Yeah,
Maura.
please do, Bill.
So the Refugee Resettlement Program has been around since 1980. The Church has been resettling refugees for decades before that, but it was codified in 1980. 10 agencies participate, the majority faith-based, and the Catholics participate through USCCB and primarily Catholic charities. Each year, on average, about 85,000 refugees come into the United States from overseas. The definition of a refugee is someone who has left their country due to persecution in some form, is in another country, and is therefore declared a refugee by the fact that they crossed their border.
Who makes that declaration?
The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees makes the declaration. At that point, there's a pool of a couple million refugees right now, in the middle of a couple 100 million displaced people. A couple million refugees who are eligible for refugee resettlement, I should say, Maura. The United States government, through some organizations overseas contracted by the government.
This is the Department of State?
The Department of State interviews individual refugees and families in 6 different locations across the globe. And they choose refugees who have a credible case of persecution to come to the United States in a lawful program. This is a lawful pathway to resettle in the United States and become eventually U.S. citizens. We participate in the program by getting allocated a certain number of refugees and going to the airport and picking them up with our Catholic Charities partners, taking them to a housing, temporary, getting them food, again, shelter, health care, helping the kids get into school, sometimes helping them to learn English if they don't have it, and basically integrating them or beginning the process for 3 months. This is the Refugee Admissions Program as it has been since 1980. It's a highly regulated, codified program monitored by the State Department, and as I mentioned, carried out by 10 national agencies and about 65 Catholic charities across the country.
Wow, it sounds like it's a lot of work, right? The vetting, the transportation, setting up the housing, the education, that's a lot of moving pieces.
It's an incredible effort, and again, highly codified, monitored by the government. We at the Catholic Conference have a role in getting the money from the government and passing it to the Catholic charities who are actually doing this resettlement in communities and cities across the country. Now, these Catholic charities have a number of other programs that they do, but this is an important one for participating in the United States government and people's humanitarian program to help refugees who have no place to go in countries overseas. Again, these refugees eligible for resettlement, they can't go home, it's been determined, nor can they stay where they are. So the United Nations and other governments like ours take couple 100,000 overall each year. Not a big number, Maura. Again, average into the United States over these years, 85, 90,000 a year into our vast country to provide them safety and a new life.
What kind of places are the refugees coming from in this day and age?
Well, certainly Afghanistan, Sudan, the Congo, Burma, places that have, had oftentimes war and instability, coming to the country to again, as I mentioned, resettle.
So the refugees come into the United States. They may or may not be Catholic. Are they Catholic even though they're being served by these Catholic agencies? Is that why we're involved in this work?
No, this program is very clearly in all the agencies, faith-based or not, take whatever refugee that's allocated to them through a process overseen by the U.S. government, State Department, that's allocated to them, and regardless of religion, certainly.
Right, so we're not doing it because they're Catholic.
No, we're doing it because we're Catholic.
And so we have a program known as POWIR.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about what that program does?
Sure. POWIR is a program to help parishes mobilize volunteers to work with refugees. And we've been conducting this program for a number of years. And essentially, Catholic charities will mobilize groups of refugees, volunteers to help refugee families as they've arrived. They may teach them English, they may drive them to a medical appointment, they may help them navigate the bus system. There are a variety of tasks. Everything is new. So they're really strangers in a strange land, and these volunteers help welcome these strangers in our land.
Yes, I was at the library not too long ago, and I saw an Afghan family that a volunteer was teaching them how to use the library.
Yes.
And show the children how to take out books and things like that. It's all new.
Very new.
Yeah. And in the statement that the USCCB issued on January 26th, the work is described as a work of mercy. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, as you know, our faith is built on the love of Christ and the human dignity of every individual, and the belief that we're all made in the image and likeness of God. So helping refugees and forced migrants is an extension of the love of our neighbor and the imperative to welcome the stranger.
So the Catholic Charities Network provides services, supports these refugees as they integrate. What happens then? Do they kind of fall into another social safety net, or how do they get along?
One of the key elements of the program is to help them find work. Every Catholic Charities agency has a small team that's in touch with businesses locally that place refugees into those businesses, not as a humanitarian gesture, so to speak. These businesses need workers. And these refugees come, they're eager to work. As we know from our experience, extending to migrants also, these refugees come eager to work, and about 75% within 3 months have a job, Maura. And collectively, as was recently done in a study by Health and Human Services, they contribute billions of dollars to our economy, to our revenues and taxes, and obviously make great contributions to our communities, as again, we all know.
Yeah, and they're extremely grateful. As you mentioned, it's a small number relative to the number of refugees that are abroad, but those who do come here are incredibly grateful and patriotic.
Absolutely. I mean, we expect them, as we do any migrant into our country, to exercise certain responsibilities, to certainly obey the laws, and to make contributions to our societies and our communities. Refugees particularly take that very seriously.
Now, We know that the Refugee Admission Program is kind of up in the air at the moment. What happened during the last Trump administration, and how is it different or similar to what we're experiencing today?
Well, you may remember the last Trump administration paused the program essentially with the underlying notion that it was not secure, that these refugees were not sufficiently vetted. A subsequent study found that they are perhaps the most vetted group of people that come into our country. They are, as they're waiting overseas to be considered to be a refugee, or when they're chosen, they're run through about 3 different databases related to security. They're interviewed by staff of the organizations contracted by the government, after, of course, the United Nations interviews them. Staff in these organizations contracted by the government, and then finally a government official goes over to those places and interviews these refugees, making sure the story is consistent throughout. And again, as I mentioned, we follow up with a triple database, if you will, vetting of these refugees. We believe the most vetted individuals that come into the country.
That must take a very long time.
It does. They wait. They can wait a couple of years, even after chosen, to go through that process. So it does take a long time. Many of these people, of course, are in refugee camps or situations for 10, 15 years before they get an opportunity to go to another country like the United States.
Wow. So last time the Trump administration paused the program, what's happening today?
So last time they paused the program, and then they reduced it considerably, and during the 4 years of the program it was reduced quite a bit, letting in the final year of the administration a few thousand refugees. This time they've also essentially paused the program by declaring no refugees can come into the country. So similar to last time, with I think a different reasoning. I believe the reasoning, was that they're to review. It's a 90-day review with the pause. That bringing them in is consistent with the new policies, the new foreign policies of our government. So it's a pause again with a 90-day review. However, in the meantime, they just sent out to USAID, which is part of State Department, sort of a foreign policy directive to stop work all over the world, including here in this program. Most of the stop work is outside of the United States. Unfortunately, we're caught up in that, and the stop work order, which basically said to cease activities, basically has put us into a conundrum and a moral dilemma. We have refugees who have been here for the last 3 months or less, and who we have said we will provide you the services that I mentioned earlier.
Right, the housing, the job training.
That's
all of
correct.
that.
Food, housing, medical care, job training. And the stop work order, while a bit confusing and we're working through it, provides us a dilemma. We feel we have a responsibility to these refugees who are already in the country.
There's nowhere else for them to go.
We will
it
not.
wasn't before they came.
No, there's no place for them to go. They are already in communities around the country under the care of the Catholic Charities organizations. So we've gone back to the government and said, we don't think that what you've told us to do is correct, and we're asking them now to reconsider this particular stop work order for these refugees and refugee families who are already in the country.
So I know the situation is changing day by day as we're trying to get a greater understanding.
Yes.
But as of right now, if you are a refugee being served by Catholic Charities in the United States, what is happening? Are you still receiving the services that we had promised to provide?
This stop work order came last Friday. We had a meeting on Monday with our affiliate agencies, our partners across the country, and our guidance is to continue at this point. We did not feel we could stop these activities. We're not sure that we know it's not morally correct, and we're not sure that it's actually legally correct what the government has done. We've written back and told them we think the interpretation of the stop work order is for us to continue these essential services and to meet these essential needs for these refugees that are in the country. We think that the State Department is considering that interpretation that we have of the stop work order.
And the USCCB has a long history, as you said, of working with the U.S. government on this program. Are you hopeful that this situation will be resolved shortly?
So this has been since 1980 that we've been working with the United States government in this program. We don't know. I mean, as you know, these orders are coming out of the White House. These are not your sort of normal State Department partners that we've had historically that are giving us these orders. That these are new directives from a new administration. So we don't know exactly what will happen. What we do hope is that the government will say, yes, you can continue these essential services as we see them and complete the services to these refugees who are already in the country.
All right. Anything else you'd like to add, Bill, before we conclude today?
No, thank you very much for having me here,
All right.
Maura.
Thank you very much, Bill. And thank you for joining us for this edition of Catholic Current. You can find out more about the USCCB's work with refugees at usccb.org. I'm Maura Moser. See you next time.